Welcome in to News and Views with Tom Lamprecht. The stories you've heard and the ones you need to hear.
Crimes that are happening in Mariupol.
Hell is what's happening there.
A Trump judge ruled the masks have to go.
There's going to be an appeal by the Justice Department.
There should be no mandates, period.
Extending Title 42 is not our decision. That is Congress's decision.
They think vetting people at the border is racist.
Today is Earth Day.
Your life, your values, your voice. This is News and Views with Tom Lamprecht on Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
All right, welcome in. It is the Environmental Wacko National Holiday, Earth Day. I'm sorry it's turned into that. I believe we should be good stewards of God's green earth, but it is Earth Day, so there you go. 2/3 of likely North Carolina general election voters believe the economy is getting worse, according to the latest Civitas poll. More than half of those polled believe President Joe Biden has contributed to the economic decline. The April 14th through 18th survey of 600 likely general election voters found 66% answering that the economy is getting worse. Just 20% believe the economy is getting better. Some 54% believe that Biden administration has worsened the economy, while 31% credit the president with improving the economy. To talk about what this poll means for the political landscape, Mitch Kokai of the Carolina Journal is with us. Mitch, welcome back to News and Views.
Well, thanks for having me, and I hope you're going to be looking forward to a nice weekend.
It looks that way. Weather-wise, couldn't be better. Let's talk about the poll. The Civitas poll appears to me not to have shocking news, but the poll sort of confirms what our suspicions are. And it also looks like this poll is a continuing trend that is not really good for Democrats.
Yeah, certainly not. This particular poll was more of an issues poll than a horse race election poll. But certainly its elements suggest bad news for the party in power, and that means the Democrats. The big finding, 66% of likely general election voters think the economy is getting worse, compared to just 20% who think the economy is getting better. And if you look at the Biden administration and its impact, 54% of those who were surveyed think the Biden administration's policies have made the economy worse, compared to just 31% who say that they think the Biden administration has made things better. Of course, Republicans overwhelmingly think the Biden administration has made things worse. Shocker. On the other side, Democrats are less likely, of course, than Republicans to think that the Biden administration has made things worse, although it's a little bit closer there. But probably most important to those who are looking for the political implications, unaffiliated voters, 59% of them, almost 3 in 5,
wow,
think the Biden administration's policies have made things worse. And we see this translate into the generic congressional and legislative election ballots. Of course, no one votes for a generic candidate, but it does give you a clue about where people are leaning. And if you look at both the congressional election ballot and the legislative election ballot, about 52% of people favor the Republican candidate, 41% favor the Democratic candidate. And with a 10-point gap between the parties, that's good news for Republicans, bad news for Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, you use the word diplomatically, you use the word leaning. As I looked at the numbers, it looked like it was a lot more than just leaning. It looked significant.
Yeah, I mean, usually in this generic ballot, you'll see the parties pretty close. Maybe one party has a 3 or 4 point edge. A 10-point edge is pretty significant, and it's very rare that either party on this generic ballot is significantly over 50%, with both the congressional and the legislative generic ballot giving Republicans at least 51% and maybe 52% support. That is quite a bit of a gap. Now, of course, as I said, we don't elect generic candidates, and the districts have been drawn, especially on the congressional side, basically to get to a particular result. So it's hard to say how that's going to translate into changes at the polls, but certainly I would think the Republican Party is much happier looking at these poll results than the Democratic Party for Democrats, one of the messages is, do you really want to have Joe Biden anywhere near you as you're campaigning for office? Because if people think the economy is getting bad, and more than half of them, and 59% of unaffiliated think the Biden administration is making things worse, certainly that's not something you want to tie yourself to.
Well, you said this was an issues poll, and obviously it is, and we can go through some specifics. But as you just mentioned, the key issue is the economy. And I would think that, and you're a political junkie, a student of politics, I would think of all the issues that would have the biggest impact on the election of candidates would be the economy.
Yeah, certainly the economy, and especially at this point, inflation. One of the things that we did in this poll was give people an option of 10 different issues and say which one to you is the biggest issue at this point. Inflation topped the list. Now, it wasn't far and away the top vote getter, but it got 18% of the response. And jobs in the economy came in number 3 at 13%. Put the two together, that's almost a third of the voters saying that economic-related issues are their top issue. And if that's true, and if the economy is looking worse, and most people are blaming it on the Biden administration, all of those things add up to bad news for the Democrats come November.
I'm just curious, where did immigration come in on your list?
Immigration was much further down, and I think that surprised about everyone. I think it was about number 8 on the list, with 6.5% to 7% saying that was their top issue. The top 5, I mentioned inflation. Second, interestingly enough, election integrity at 14%. Then jobs in the economy. Taxes and government spending had about 10%, as did healthcare. Those were the top 5. Immigration was down at about 7 or 8. Education was also lower than you might have expected, since that's one topic that people on all sides of the political spectrum always say is important to them. Energy and the environment, a little bit lower than certainly Democrats might tout, but even folks on all sides of the political spectrum often pay attention to that issue.
Well, all these issues are, I think, have a pretty high place in people's thinking, but it's what is screaming the loudest, and at the moment it appears to be inflation in the economy. And I don't think you can discount those other issues. I still think they're of vast importance. And again, you look at all those issues, and it's pretty obvious that one party leans heavily one way and the other party leans pretty heavily the other way. And again, not looking good for the Democrats in the upcoming election. Granted, I realize that there is, now between now and November, a lot of things could change. That's almost a lifetime in the life of politics. But it seems, looking at the polling and looking at the past polling that Civitas has done. By the way, we're talking to Mitch Kokai of Civitas and Carolina Journal on this poll. It appears to me that there's a solid trend since November of 2021, and each time you've done these polls, it's just a little worse news for Joe Biden's administration and Democrats in general, month after month.
Yeah, that's certainly true. The trend line, because one poll in and of itself could tell you a little bit, but trend lines are more important, and the trends are looking bad, especially for the National Democrats. The one spot in this poll that is outside of that realm is Governor Roy Cooper. He actually does a little bit better in this poll than he did the last time around. For several months, going back to last June, he had been underwater in terms of his approval rating. This time he's back above water, still not at 50%, down at 46%, but his disapproval is down to 42%. My guess is there are a lot of people in North Carolina politics saying, what's Roy Cooper doing and how can we buy into that? If you see candidates out there on the campaign trail trying to tie themselves to Roy Cooper, you'll know why that is. And my guess is that they're doing that. They're not tying themselves to Joe Biden. And so that'll be one of the Republicans' jobs, is to say, look, if you're buying the Democratic package, what you're buying is the Biden administration.
Well, and North Carolina's economy is doing very well, and frankly, I would credit more towards the legislature than I would towards Roy Cooper, but he's the guy at the top, so I think he's benefiting from that.
Yeah, I think you're certainly right about that. He doesn't tend to tout this very much, but one of the reasons that he is able to have some success in bringing companies in here is that the Republican-led General Assembly flattened the tax and then cut the tax rate and continues to cut the tax rate. In fact, this is not something that Governor Cooper is jumping up and down about, but he signed a budget that had more Republican tax cuts. The corporate tax rate is on its way over the next 7 or 8 years to zero, and the personal income tax rate, which had been at 5.25%, after some continuing lowering from the first chance that the Republicans had to put in a flat tax, it's going to be on its way down to 3.99%. That's the type of thing that businesses look at before they even start thinking about other things about, what's the highway situation like where we are, or what's the climate, or what are the schools like. But many of them just say, all right, what are the top tax rates?
Right.
If your tax rate's too high, they don't even look any step beyond that. They've been looking at North Carolina, where we're going on taxes, where we're going on regulation, and that's why North Carolina gets to be part of the conversation, and Governor Cooper ends up getting some of the benefits from that.
By the way, since you brought up the governor, the Carolina Journal, I guess it was yesterday or the day before, highlighted an article out of the Washington Post that said that Roy Cooper was in the top 10 of Democrats as possible presidential candidates in 2024. Were you surprised by that?
Not surprised in that this type of ranking always comes about from the national Democrats, the people who are in D.C., and as they're coming up with these lists, they look at the top senators. Obviously, they'll put in the vice presidents in there as a potential person. But then they look around and say, okay, who are the executives across the country that seem to be having some success? And if you have a southern state that has tended to vote for Republicans in national elections, but there's a Democratic governor who's won not once, won twice, and has pretty good favorability, they're saying to themselves, well, this guy has something going for him.
Right.
We've got to put him up there. Because he's been talked about for a while as a potential candidate to be a vice president. And now, after having won 2 elections and having no opportunity to run again for governor in the next election, if he's going to do something else, it would likely be either the Senate, which he's shown no interest in, or something on the national ticket. So I wasn't terribly surprised. I think if people looked more into the success that Roy Cooper's had, they might say, well, I don't know how well this translates to the national stage, but certainly Democrats are looking for someone who's had success, and whether you like him or not, you could definitely say Roy Cooper has had electoral success.
Well, and North Carolina is an important state, and if you put a Roy Cooper on the ticket, that would help carry the state. Obviously, that could have an impact in the overall election. But let me ask you. Also,
certainly with more electoral votes now too.
Yeah,
we picked up another electoral vote, so we are one of the big states now, and having the opportunity, because we've seen it usually since the 70s. Republicans have won the presidential race, but it has happened at times. The first time Barack Obama ran, he won. So it's not out of the picture that North Carolina could swing to the Dems.
One other point I wanted to bring up, I thought was an interesting insight. And again, I would be encouraging news for Republicans when it comes to gaining control of the North Carolina Supreme Court. Likely voters are not in lockstep with recent court controversies such as voter photo ID, felons being able to vote prior to completing their parole, probation, and other post-release supervision. I thought that was really interesting. The questions you asked that related to the rather high-profile court decisions, it appears that the general public is not in lockstep with the North Carolina Supreme Court and even lower courts.
Yeah, in fact, the Supreme Court has not yet issued any rulings on voter ID, so it'll be interesting to see what it does. But you, of course, know that a lower court has thrown out voter ID, and 68% of North Carolinians still support it, including, I find this very interesting, the arguments against voter ID are typically that because it's harder for African Americans to get access to some of these IDs, that this is somehow discriminatory toward them. Well, a clear majority of black voters support voter ID. Percentage is lower than the population as a whole, but it's still 53%, with, I believe, 31% against it. So there's quite a bit of support for voter ID among black voters, because if they're not just listening to the Democratic Party telling them that this is a terrible thing, they know, hey, election integrity is important, and if people have to prove who they are when they go to vote, this is a good thing, no matter what your political leanings are. And you also referenced the recent court ruling on the felons voting. Yes, 54% of voters don't like that court ruling that says if you are out of prison but haven't finished your complete sentence, you should be able to vote. They prefer what our state constitution says, which is felons can't vote unless they have complied with all of the requirements set out by law. 66% of people said they support that part of the Constitution.
Well, you know, and the big picture issue on the two things that you've just said and highlighted is, and you hit upon a great point, is it appears to me that even your typical Democrat voter, black voters in North Carolina, I mean, overall, it's factual that most of them are registered as Democrats. They're not buying in to the rhetoric that the progressives are trying to sell.
Yeah, that's certainly true, and that's been one of the things that I think Republicans have been trying to focus on for a while, is how do we send the message to folks who are seen as being voting in lockstep with the Democratic Party that this party doesn't have your best interests at heart, the party that wants to have less government in your lives, lower taxes for you, more opportunities for you to educate your kids in the schools of your choice. That's the party you should go for, not a party that says, oh, we're going to take care of you. And I don't know that message has been particularly successful over the years, but certainly it's something that Republicans have been trying to do. And I think this poll shows that there is an opportunity for them if they pick the correct issues and if they pick the correct message for them to be able to make inroads in some of these groups that have seemed to be so overwhelmingly in favor of Democrats in the past.
And least anyone think that this poll has a political party bias. You really had a very fair cross-section of Democrats, Republicans, and independents. In fact, I think you had more Democrats in the poll than you had Republicans. Just a slight difference, but it certainly wasn't biased towards the outcome that you came up with.
No, this poll was designed to be a good cross-sample of North Carolina likely general election voters. It's a little bit different than the one that we put out 2 weeks ago, which was a poll of likely Republican primary voters. That's the one where we did the horse race showing that Ted Budd had a 10-point or so lead over Pat McCrory. We also looked at some of the top Republican officials and got Republican primary voters' views of them. But this one was designed to get an accurate cross-section of the likely general election voters. So we're not skewing it toward Republicans. This is the electorate that's likely to come out and vote in November.
Mitch Kokai from Civitas and the Carolina Journal. Mitch, thanks for the insights and great job on the polling. Look forward to your next one, and we'll talk again.
Sounds good. We'll have another one in May, and this time, for folks who are interested in it, we'll be back in-person poll presentations. First time since COVID hit, so that's something we're looking forward to.
Well, we'll help you promote that because that'll be big stuff. Look forward to it. Mitch Kokai, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Stay with us. More news and views coming up.
Reserve it, then ride home in it at Greenville Toyota. Camrys, Corollas, Tundra trucks, RAV4s, and more are on the way. Reserve yours before it's gone. Plus, get more for your trade. Reserve and ride today at Greenville Toyota.
Hey, we're at Maribella's in Greenville, the new location of Maribella's on Fire Tower Road. If you haven't been to this place yet, let me tell you, you are missing out. I want to introduce my friends from Maribella's. I've got Sal, Massimo, and Pietro here. These guys are awesome. Not only do they make great food, they do a lot of things for the community, which we're going to be talking about. But Sal, let's start with you. Let's talk about the new location of Maribella's on Fire Tower Road. I'm a regular here. I love it. You guys call it Old World Pizza. Tell us what's different about your pizza.
Well, we got two kinds of pizzas. We have the traditional American style, and then we have the old world pizza, which is made with fresh mozzarella, and the way they do it in Italy.
Massimo, when you talk about doing this food right, it's authentic. And when I talk about authentic, you grew up in Italy, so you grew up with this food. You know how to make it.
Yeah, because we grew up in Italy, we know the ingredient, and everything we do from scratch. And the right ingredient it's been hard for us to bring over here. And now finally we can get the right ingredient to make a right pizza.
All right, now I'm going to talk to my friend Pietro here at Marabella's. He's got the Nino's shirt on today. We're going to talk about Nino's, which is another great dining experience, upscale dining experience, on another segment upcoming. But Pietro, let's talk about Marabella's. For people who've never been to Marabella's, what's the experience going to be like when they come here? Not only pizzas, but pastas, salads, sandwiches, you got it all.
Yes, we do. We have new sandwiches that we put in this new location, and we're going to spread it to the other locations.
The guys here at Marabella's have won national pizza competitions, so you know it's good. Thanks to Sal, Massimo, and Pietro. Folks, do yourself a favor. Come to the new Marabella's here on Fire Tower Road in Greenville, or Marabella's on Greenville Boulevard, or Marabella's in Washington on Carolina Avenue. Also, don't forget upscale dining at Nino's on Red Banks Road.
Reserve and ride your pre-owned vehicle at Greenville Toyota. Shop a huge selection of quality used cars, trucks, SUVs, even luxury models. All with no charge maintenance, plus a 100,000-mile used car warranty. Reserve and ride at Greenville Toyota.
Back to the show that really makes you think.
He is a genius.
He's all powerful.
He brought a kind of heat.
He could be the best.
Just don't hurt yourself, okay? More news and views on Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
Welcome back in. News and views for a Friday, April the 22nd, 2022, 042222. It was 28 years ago today, 1994. Richard Nixon died, age 82, of a stroke. 158 years ago today, 1864, Congress authorized the use of the phrase, "In God We Trust," on U.S. coins. Taking a quick look at your weather forecast, looks pretty good for this weekend. I mean, it looks really good. Clear tonight, a low around 51. Sunshine for Saturday, a high around 81. Sunday, more of the same. A high around 85 on Sunday. Overnight lows will be in the mid-50s, so a great-looking weekend. Get out and enjoy. Disney stock has taken a plunge. And interestingly, just yesterday, the House in Florida passed the same bill that the Senate passed the day before, basically taking away certain tax advantages that Disney had, as well as the fact that the state had given Disney the opportunity to pretty much be its own government in terms of zoning issues and that sort of thing. That is now taken away as soon as DeSantis signs that bill. And it is not going well for Disney. As they go woke, they're going broke. The Disney stock reached an all-time high in March of 2021, sharing at $200 per share. The stock yesterday was down approximately 33% from that point, $120 a share from a year ago. And now it looks as if Disney CEO Bob Chapek is possibly going to be out of a job. There are headlines out today just talking about the fact that the board at Disney might give Bob the boot. Investors are not too happy. Netflix shares, which I'm assuming from the way this article is reading out of Fox Business, is Netflix a part of Disney? I'm assuming it is, and they have not had a good week. Dropped 35% just this week. Netflix not having quite as good time of it here in recent weeks and months as they did. And again, go woke, go broke. Wasn't Netflix the folks that decided to sign on the Obamas and allow them to create some of the content? Do people really want to see? I'm sorry. I can't imagine anybody, let's sit down and see what the Obamas came up with. In fact, Exhibit A on that comment, Spotify has basically said goodbye to the Obamas. Now, the real big names in podcasts, like Joe Rogan and others, I mean, it's big bucks because of the number of listeners and subscribers guys like Joe Rogan have. I mean, Joe Rogan is making millions because of the millions of listeners he has to his podcast. Well, there were stories out earlier this week talking about how the Obamas were going to leave Spotify, as if they were out shopping their highly sought-after podcast. You dig down a little deeper and you find out, no, it wasn't the Obamas that said goodbye to Spotify. It was Spotify that said goodbye to the Obamas. Apparently, the Obamas, they thought, hey, everybody wants to listen to our podcast. You need to pay us big bucks for our podcast. Spotify said, I don't think so. Bloomberg News reported Wednesday that Higher Ground, the production company run by Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama, is seeking a multi-million-dollar deal elsewhere as their Spotify deal expires. And it's expiring with Spotify saying, see ya, bye-bye. So, I mean, this is revealing. This is revealing in a lot of fronts. But, again, just as we talked to Mitch Kokai in the first segment, people are not buying the liberal rhetoric. They're not buying into the progressive rhetoric. Go woke, go broke. I mean, there's a story earlier this week. The face of wokeness in the NFL, Kaepernick, he wants to, and the guy that said, hey, you know what, working for the NFL, playing for the NFL is like being on the slave trade market. You're a slave to the NFL. Guess what? He wants to be a slave again. He wants to get back in the NFL and said, you know what, I'll be a second-string quarterback, but I need to get back in, and then you'll see me as a first-string quarterback before long. Yeah, right. But wait for it. On this Obama deal with Spotify, wait for it. And this is why people are sick of progressives. The progressives will come out there and they will say, oh, this is a racist move by Spotify. They didn't sign the Obamas back up. They have signed Joe Rogan up, and they've kept Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan's a conservative, and Obama's a liberal. And what people, Spotify is not interested in politics. They're interested in subscribers. That's how they make their money. Nobody is listening to the Obamas. People are voting with their feet when it comes to Disney. They're switching off the crap. They're switching off the garbage. They're switching off the progressive ideology. Speaking of the Obamas, the sons of Michelle Obama's brother have been removed from a prestigious private school after their parents accused the school of racism, prompting a lawsuit from the parents. A lawsuit filed on Monday in a Wisconsin court. Craig and Kelly Robinson say the University School of Milwaukee booted their two sons, ages 11 and 9, as payback for the parents lodging complaints of racism against the school. They retaliated, kicking the two young children out of the school, Greg Robinson said. The Robinsons say they filed 2 reports with the school in January and March of 2021, voicing concerns that they witness racial stereotypes in virtual classroom assignments. This all started as a lot of parents, when we heard what was going on in the classroom because of COVID, Greg Robinson told Good Morning America host Robin Roberts. There was repeated use of racial and ethnic stereotypes that were in actual assignments. Yeah, are you ready for this terrible sin that was committed? This is what he said. The use of the word plantation and things of that nature. That's the best you could come up with? There was an assignment out there, and in the assignment, they used the word plantation. And that is racial stereotyping. Can you not use the word black and white anymore? Are those words you can't utter anymore because they would be considered racial? You know, I think plantation, if it's a history lesson and we're going to talk about the South, are we not going to talk about the fact that we had plantations? Certain things you can't say, apparently. Robinson added, in addition to the racial and ethnic stereotypes, there was an insensitivity to socioeconomic status as well as disregard for the children who weren't physically in the classroom. Again, it sounds like the guy is grasping for straws and making accusations against the school. The Robinson said they filed a report as through bias incident reporting system in January 2021, and again in March of 2021. They say that no action was taken, and then they learned their sons were denied re-enrollment in April of 2021. So now they're suing. This all happened last year. What's interesting is the school paints a totally different picture, claiming that according to a letter cited in the lawsuit, that the Robinson parents repeatedly engaged in disrespectful and demanding communications with and about our teachers and administrators. In the termination letter, the school wrote that it has only become more evident that there has been a complete breakdown in your family's trust and respect for the school. In a statement, the school suggested that Craig and Kelly Robinson had engaged in bullying that was detrimental to the school's operation. Apparently, the acorns don't fall too far from the tree. I mean, this is, I'm sorry, I'm being blunt here, but this is typical. This is typical. We'll be the bullies, and we'll make these big accusations about how terrible you are, and we can say anything we want and do anything we want because we're going to play the race card. And for too many years, too many decades, we've had people from every type of background, and primarily conservatives, instead of standing up to these individuals that play the race card, they fall down and quiver and cower in the corner. Oh, don't use the race card on me. I'll do whatever I can to avoid being accused of being a racist. I've said this from the 12 years ago when we started this program. Don't cower to someone using the race card. You know who you are. You know your heart. Don't cower to false accusations. But hey, they're playing the race card. And kudos to the school. Kudos to the school. And I imagine, I'm guessing here. I have no evidence on this, but my guess would be the school probably leans left. And yet they said that we're done with it. Take your accusations, your false statements, take them elsewhere. Bernie Sanders is considering yet another run for president in 2024. Bernie will be 83. This guy is older than Joe Biden. This guy's a year older than Joe Biden. He thinks because Biden's terrible poll numbers, he can win. They think he can come back and win. This is hilarious. Now, granted, it's not a bad business model. I mean, a guy like Bernie runs, gets his name back up, repeated in the news, and he can charge more for his speeches. And I mean, look, this is what it's all about. 6 of the 15 richest counties in the country are suburban counties in Virginia and Maryland outside of D.C. 6 of the 15 richest counties. And these people are supposed to be, quote, civil servants. They're making money hand over fist. And this has got to be one of the reasons that Bernie would want to run again. But Bernie says, Joe's popularity is waning. This is my opportunity to run. The problem is, Joe and Bernie, you guys are identical. Joe Biden has sunk in the polls basically implementing the socialist ideas of a guy like Bernie Sanders. And apparently Bernie can't connect those dots. And then the second thing people would say is, well, if it's not because Joe's policies stink, it's because his cognitive abilities are absent 75% of the time. Well, Bernie's a year older than Joe is. You can't make it up. But listen, I will not be surprised at all if Bernie makes another run at it. I think it's a no-lose situation for Bernie, the socialist who wants everybody to make sure everybody has equal pay, equal everything. I mean, that's what socialism is all about. But Bernie is the greatest among equals, apparently, with his several households and his the guy that took his honeymoon in the Soviet Union. You can't make it up. And yet he's making money as a politician, big bucks, multiple houses, and yet he'll run as a socialist. Hey, we got to take another time out. Stay with us. More news and views coming right up.
Fantastic Sam's Cut and Color is hiring stylists. If you're driven, creative, and ready to make an impact, then we're looking for you. We offer competitive salaries, flexible schedules, and professional training with the newest technologies and equipment in the industry. Stop by your local Fantastic Sam's today and show us what you've got. Apply at locations in Goldsboro, Kinston, Greenville, New Bern, Morehead City, Jacksonville, and Calabash. Fantastic Sam's, real salon experience, real savings, real fantastic.
Well, folks, it's only 8 a.m. and it's going to be another hot one. Today's high is 85 degrees with lows ranging in the upper 50s. Tomorrow's more of the same, plus some light wind coming in from the northeast. Coming up at 8:30, Paul's got an exclusive.
Babe, it's 8 a.m.
Fried chicken, better with Pepsi.
It's going to change. I promise you. As I stand here, it will change. Okay, and when it does, that stadium, it's going to be rocking, and heaven help whoever walks in there to play us. And I can promise you, there will be no quarter, ever.
The best burgers around. Everyone loves a thick, juicy, and fresh burger. Tiebreakers in Greenville, plus the all-new Tiebreakers in Winterville. Do real burgers better than anybody. So don't just go to any burger-themed restaurant chain. It's time to break the chain and eat local. Tiebreakers, real burgers at its best.
Everybody loves burgers.
Air Service is back at Pitt Greenville Airport, offering safe, clean facilities and flights from American Airlines. That means the short commute, quicker lines, and better prices that get you where you're going fast and easy. See it for yourself. There's great things inside at Pitt Greenville Airport.
Thing you should do after work.
I turn on the radio.
Check in with Tom and Benny.
Gotta know what's happening in my city.
What's going on in my backyard.
Things that are happening locally.
I like the local news.
Things that I don't hear everywhere else.
For the local news you want.
Kept me informed for all of the local stuff, It let me know what was going on in the local community.
Eastern Carolina's news source is News and Views on Talk 96.3 and 103.7.
Welcome back in. Our theme, if you've noticed, and we just follow the news and make comments on the news, but the theme out there today is that the Democrats are in rough shape and they're not attracting a following from any real demographic. As we talk to Mitch Kokai, even black Americans, black North Carolinians, are in agreement with things such as voter photo ID. And again, boy, the comments that came over the photo ID from progressives and the mainstream media is, this is terrible. This is disenfranchising. This is not fair to poor people. It's not fair to black people, which we know is a load of garbage. We know is their talking point, but they keep hitting upon it over and over again. We're going to take it to the North Carolina Supreme Court. And listen, as Mitch said, the North Carolina Supreme Court has not ruled on that issue yet, but wait for it. It's coming, and it's not a hard prediction. I mean, I predicted what they would do on the district maps, and they did it. And I'm predicting now they will knock down the voter photo ID bill. And, they will say this is disenfranchisement, which is, again, it's a load of baloney. I'm trying to keep it PG here. People aren't buying into it. And certain demographic groups that the Democrats think, you know what, if we can grab a hold of this, we can win with this. And it's not happening. Two stories out, both out of the Daily Caller, interestingly. One detailed story talks about the fact that Asian Americans who in years past, decades past, came in and joined the Democrat Party. Because the Democrats have put out their rhetoric about how, they're not the racist party, which in fact they are. I mean, you look how they use race and the race card, that's called racism. But Asian Americans, as they've begun to see that they're not people of color enough, apparently, because Democrats, liberals, progressives have said it's not fair that Asian Americans are being too successful. So therefore, we're going to limit their opportunities for education. We're not going to allow them into the prestigious schools, even though as a demographic, they score higher than anyone. As a demographic, they have higher incomes than the average, even Caucasian. And apparently they're getting tired of it. They're bolting from the Democratic Party. The Asian population grew by 35.5% between 2010 and 2020, according to census surveys. Only 55% of Asian Americans approved of Joe Biden's in January poll released by the Pew Center. A majority of polls do not include Asian Americans as a separate demographic because they're such a small demographic. But more and more polling are coming out, and more anecdotal polling is just saying that the Asian Americans have had enough. They're tired of being kicked around. And now you're seeing Asian Americans for the first time ever running as Republicans for elected office. Not good for the Democrats. Another story out. The Hispanic voters are bolting. Now, what's interesting about Hispanic voters is the Democrats haven't been able to connect the dots in that Hispanic voters usually are, a lot of them are Catholic, Roman Catholic, and a lot of them very strongly embrace the sanctity of life. They very strongly embrace family and marriage, all the things that the Democrats seem to be opposed to. The Daily Caller reports when Victor Jimenez decided to switch to the Republican Party last December, his friends blocked him on Instagram. Others would not answer his phone calls. Jimenez and his family immigrated from the Dominican Republic to Puerto Rico in 2008, and shortly after that, he moved to Alaska. More recently, he's been in Washington, D.C., working for the mayor there, Mayor Bowser. There's a trend that all Latinos, when they come here, they need to be Democrats, in that everybody is so racist and all that, Jimenez told the Daily Caller. But I can tell you that I've never experienced anything that I would consider racist in my years in this country, ever. That's an interesting point. The Democrats need to keep racism alive for their party to survive. They need to continue to tell minorities and the poor that conservatives are white supremacists and that the minority is the victim. I mean, think about it. It's true. They need to keep racism alive. They don't want it cured. If they stopped talking about racism, they'd have nothing to talk about. The election of Donald Trump in 2016, along with Republican gains in the 2020 presidential election, revealed a rightward shift among Hispanic and Latino voters, historically a demographic that has strongly supported Democrats. 54% of Hispanic voters disapprove of Joe Biden's job performance. Only 26% approve, according to a Quinnipiac poll. Jimenez worked as a lead public affairs officer for Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser before switching parties. Quote, I know Mayor Bowser. I think she has good intentions. I just don't agree with a lot of things they do, he said, meaning their policy on sanctuary cities, for example. That's the one thing I do not agree on. And that, for me, was kind of the point where I said, okay, I don't agree with this. I think if someone commits a crime, they should be detained and should be deported. There's this notion that Hispanics agree with open borders and that Hispanics agree with illegal immigration. And that couldn't be further from the truth, he said. Jimenez said the Democrat Party prides itself to be so accepting and open and blah, 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 until you are conservative. That pretty much sums it up. If you don't come out as a conservative, then that's the problem. If you do come out as conservative, then that's the problem. They can't even hear your argument because you're immediately labeled as stupid. You're not open. You're a racist. Like a racist? Are you kidding me? He said. No, that's not it. I just don't agree with these values. Listen, that's what we heard from when Barack Obama was in the White House, right? If you disagreed with his policies, and I can't think of one off the top of my head that I agreed with, you were labeled as a racist. It had nothing to do, according to the progressives, it had nothing to do with the policies. It had everything to do with he was black, and that means you're a racist because you disagree with his policies. That is a pretty short-sighted, shallow response. Claudia Alcázar became a Republican 2 years ago after being a Democrat for most of her life. She now serves as county chairwoman for the Republican Party in Starr County, Texas, which is located right on the southern border. She said people can no longer go for walks, ride bikes, or skateboard even during the day because people are crossing the border. I understand we want to give people a better chance in life, but we've got to take care of Americans first, she said. She said the GOP can keep her support ahead of 2022 and 2024 elections and beyond by focusing on America First policies. Now, remember what the Democrats and progressive and the mainstream media said, that Donald Trump is a white supremacist. He's a racist because he was putting America first. I mean, listen, their answer and their comeback for everything is playing the race card. And people aren't buying it. And those people that supposedly are the victims of conservatives are embracing the conservative values. Democrats are in trouble. And again, going back to what we started out with today, the Civitas poll, this isn't a flash in the pan. Since Joe Biden took office in January of 2021, and he began to undo the things that Donald Trump had put into place, things dealing with taxes, things dealing with regulations, things dealing with the border, things dealing with energy, things dealing with the military, Joe decided, nope, I'm going to undo everything. And we've seen the disaster. We've seen the disaster with gas prices. We've seen the disaster with the border crisis. We saw the disaster in Afghanistan. It is a trend. It is a steady trend. Poll after poll, month after month, Joe gets further down in the dumps, and the Democrats go down with him. And that's why right now you have Democrats have come out and said, Joe, you better rethink Title 42 because it ain't looking good for us. We're going down and going down fast. Breitbart's got an interesting story on this. Soaring gas prices, historic inflation, supply chain bottlenecks, lifting crime rates, a porous southern border, and increasing U.S. absence on the global diplomatic stage. Biden will reportedly address these issues amongst many more. His answer? His answer, it's not my fault. Blame the Republicans. According to the Associated Press, mainstream media, a report out today, the president will seek to portray himself as a man of action. The guy can't walk without shuffling, and he's going to portray himself as a man of action, stymied at every turn by the GOP in a spectacular attempt at electoral blame shifting in the run-up to the midterm elections. And I'm telling you right now, it ain't going to work.
True international effort to pressure.
Joe Biden, the man of action.
I got hairy legs.
Listen, and remember what he said. And he always said, I mean this sincerely. I'm not joking here. Name me something that the National Republican Party is for. Joe, we're for you getting out of office. That's one thing. We're for making fossil fuel more abundant, lowering gas prices. We're for stopping the out-of-control drunken sailor spending that's causing inflation.
Come on.
We're for deregulation that's causing the bottlenecks. We're for reimposing sentencing that's appropriate with the crimes being done. We're for securing the border. And we're for actually taking a significant lead in global politics. This idea of leading from behind. Joe, you're so far behind, you can't even see the rear end of the people in front of you. Joe, the Republicans, conservatives, they are for what you're against, and they're against what you are for. That's pretty much sums it up. Hey, listen, it's going to be a great weekend. Get out, enjoy, and we'll be back with you Monday at 5. We'll see you then. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. What do you see when you imagine life on the coast? Is it salty or sweet? Is it refined or a bit wild? Perhaps it's the perfect combination of everything you ever dreamed of. This is the very best of the best of living on the coast. Bow Coast.
Well, folks, it's only 8 a.m. and it's going to be another hot one. Today's high is 85 degrees with lows ranging in the upper 50s. Tomorrow's more of the same, plus some light wind coming in from the northeast. Coming up at 8:30, Paul's got an exclusive
Babe,
heartwarming
it's
story.
8 a.m.
Fried chicken, better with Pepsi.
And we're on location at one of my favorite places in the whole planet because this is some of the best food you're ever going to eat in your life. We are at Nino's on Red Banks Road in Greenville. It's one of my hangouts. It's one of the places that I love. I got my friend Pietro Pasalacqua. How'd I do?
You did great.
Let's talk about the food. What makes this place? I know it's special Italian from authentic Italians, but tell us why it's so special.
Because everything we do, it's really what we came up on the menu from what we did at home, from my grandparents, my parents. So it's exactly what we eat at home, and that's what the way we cook. That's why it's special.
And the atmosphere in this place is special also. From the bar to the two dining areas. You got two different dining areas, and now the weather's nice, so there's going to be a lot of folks that want to eat outside.
Yeah, we have two rooms. One room is designed a little different. We're also working on the patio to make it more attractive and more useful in the summer with the cocktail service. And we're always improving our services.
And, of course, my friends here, my buddy, Chef Massimo, who I love, and Sal and Pietro, you guys do a great job here. Not just Italian, but I had a great pork chop here the other night. You got great steaks, too.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're also adding filet mignon in the future on our menu. And Massimo is coming out with a really good side dishes for it. And so we're really excited to come out with new meats and fish dishes.
All right, Nino's on Red Banks Road in Greenville. Same people that give you Marabello's and the great pizza that you get at Marabello's, but this is fine dining at Nino's. If you haven't been here, you don't know what you're missing. Come see them at Nino's on Red Banks Road. And Pietro, what is that famous saying about Nino's?
The food that you enjoy with people that you love.